Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to the president of Ad Club, Gina Grillo.
Welcome, everyone. We are thrilled to be back live. We are committed to keeping all of us connected. We've tried really hard during COVID to do that, and it's so good just to see everybody's face smiling back at me instead of on a Zoom. One of the benefits of COVID is that people from all over the country now, or actually the world, can tune into our events. So we've seen a great uptick in our events, both in person and online. So we welcome everybody. In our Conversations With series, our board chair and SVP and head of digital sales at Nielsen, Rick Song, interviews thought leaders in our membership and provides them with a glimpse of their personal success and pressing topics of the day. Today's session, we're thrilled to have, excuse me, I guess I'm too excited. Too excited. We are thrilled to have Ad Club board member and ECD of Experience Design at VML Health, Walter Geer. Before we get started, I want to encourage those of you that are not members to join, because the club has a tremendous amount of resources that you can tap into, so we hope that you do that. If you visit the website, it's really spelled out. If you want to get involved in professional development, if you want to see what events are coming up, if you want to enter the Andes, if you want to mentor and be a part of the foundation work, all of that is available. I just want to share with you some upcoming programming. On May 4th, Audigent, one of our corporate members, is having a conversation on retail media. We have an AAPI leadership event for the Asian American community at Nielsen on May 10th. Our next Conversations With is going to be with Jill Hamilton, who's VP at American Express. And we encourage you to join us for this series. Today, feel free to socialize anything from today. You could post it and just tag us at the Ad Club NY. And these programs don't happen. As a not-for-profit, we really rely on the community to support what we do. Today, we're in Ogilvy's incredible space, thanks to Devika Bolanchandi, who is president of Ogilvy. And really special thanks to GSTV. I'd like to welcome Terry Lavin, who is their Regional Vice President of Client Partnerships, up today to say a quick hello. But thank you so much for the support. Welcome.
Gina. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Gina. And it is an absolute pleasure to be here sponsoring the Ad Clubs and Conversations With, in this particular case, Rick Song and Walter Geer. The creativity and innovation discussion is constantly changing, and I think communications and communities like ours really benefit from being with each other and learning from one another. A quick thing about GSTV, for those of you who live in New York City or in New Jersey, there are people that have cars, and those cars are fueled up at gas stations around the world. So GSTV, we're reaching out to over 28,000 stations. And 100 million people as they habitually fuel up weekly and bi-weekly. So here's a little video of what we've been up to, and I hope you enjoy it. Now please welcome to the stage Rick Song, Chair of the Ad Club Board and Head of Digital for Nielsen, and Mr. Walter Geer, Chief Experience Design Officer at VMYLNR. Gentlemen.
right. How's everybody doing? All right.
Thanks for being here, everybody.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Walt.
It is a pleasure to see you as
So
always.
excited to do in-person events. This is our second one. It's a thrill to kind of be in. You never knew how much you'd appreciate actually seeing people in person until this moment in time. Right?
It's nice. It's nice. It feels good.
Before we get to the interesting topic of innovation and creativity, you've had a truly unique and dynamic career. So before we jump into kind of the heart of the topic, let's let the membership learn a little about yourself. Let's hear about your personal story and your journey to Chief Experience Design Officer at BML Weinar.
Yeah, I won't. I could burn down a lot of trees with my resume, and I'm not going to give you the long story. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. You know, I was never that guy that was like the creative that has like all these different degrees and like, you know, certificates in that and like and went to school for art and all this like. Here's something funny. My first year in college, I was a nursing major.
Wow.
Right. I was nursing. I was like doing bed baths and wiping butts, right?
Wow.
And
you heard it here first.
Yes,
everybody.
yes. And so like I've never said that publicly actually. So I got in, and my first semester was 6 a.m. clinicals on a Wednesday, and like learning about the body and biology and all this stuff. And I had a 1.6 GPA, man. My dad had to like write a letter to get me back into school for the next semester. Needless to say, I switched over to business, and things.
So the letter worked.
It worked out. But yeah, I mean, I spent the bulk of my career really focusing on leaning heavily into transformative technology and innovation, and it's allowed me to get into some really interesting rooms with individuals who are just really open about just like.
How did you make that transition though? You know, so from business to be like, oh.
Yeah.
Advertising is a thing that
so I got out of college and had no idea what I wanted to do. And my dad was an engineer, and I was always like, man, I just want to do what he does. And he got me an interview at a place called Transworld Entertainment, TWEC. Many of you might not know them, but they are the largest music distributor in the world at the time. Clearly, they're gone now, right? And when he got me an interview there, I went in, and it was for a web designer role. I barely had an email address. And so the guy was like, young lady actually was like, do you know HTML? Sure. No JavaScript? Sure. Photoshop? Sure. Had no fucking idea what any of those acronyms or words were. And they gave me the job on the spot for 2 weeks, and 2 week off, for what a 2 week start date. I asked for 3, and I went to the library and just studied and kind of figured along the way, like, yeah, I actually like it. So after going there, I went to JP Morgan for a year, but then pivoted over to New York Times. And when I went to the New York Times, I was their first rich media hire. And it was like, what's this flash thing? How can we do this? What are these expandable banners? And that really gave me the ability to kind of step into more of the advertising space and then start thinking broadly, because my role there was like, well, people are starting to do this thing called expandable banners. What is that? I went on and like we did like the very first peel ad. If some of you are like that old, right? You click and then it peels the whole page over. So it was interesting. That's where we invented sequential messaging, right? So for many of you know, it's like a pretty standard format solution today. You go to a website, you go to buy a pair of shoes or something, decide not to buy them. You go to Instagram, Facebook, all these other places, and the ad follows you wherever you go. We called that a surround session. And the idea was we're going to do it for 5 different page views, right? Keep them in there, because the idea was, we don't have a way to follow people, and we're serving them this one ad. Like, how do we see them again? And when we see them again, what do we do? And we're like, let's use cookies and let's track them. So yeah, I mean, it was an interesting time, to say the least.
Well, I mean, to say the least, you were a technologist and an early adopter in digital rich media, digital ad formats, and using insights to kind of inspire and drive creativity. What was your first experience like when you kind of applied these things for the first time? You're like, oh, this is kind of like how I'm going to carve out my path.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you talk about innovation, the biggest problem is that, you know, every brand wants to do it, but realistically, especially in health, they're in a race for second, right? We don't want to do it first. We want to do second, see what everyone else does first. But when you talk about innovation or even transformative technology, it is, oh, this is going to cost more. It's going to take more time to build. It means I have to learn something new. Why don't we just go back to the low-hanging fruit? Can you just update my site real quick, right? So, you know, when I kind of realized that, you know, we as creatives are consistently throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks, right? We're coming up with these big grand ideas for these RFPs for millions of dollars, and it's like that challenge of getting them to trust that this is what's going to work. So earlier on in my career, when I was at Viacom, we actually opened up the first biometrics usability lab. And we partnered with MIT, and what was amazing about that is We understood the emotional state of an individual when they interacted and engaged with something, and in my case, it was ads. So we were pulling things like heart rate, pupil dilation, arousal, which was really weird, sweat in the palms. You research people that are awkward. That's an odd thing to say in a meeting, arousal. But, facial expressions, whether they're leaning forward or backwards, and through this, I could tell what works based off color, speed of animation, position on page, the whole 9 yards. So what it allowed me to do is innovate, create these solutions, bring them into a usability lab, test it against a particular demographic, refine it, bring it back, and then go to a client and essentially guarantee effectiveness because I know that this is going to work because of all these results.
So having said that, and by the way, I don't really know that many people who have any patents of any kind. You hold like 6 for digital ad formats. So, and clearly you adopted, technology into your thinking early from the media side, and we'll get to the agency work. How is that, talk about how you even came up with, hey, we should file a patent for this.
I can't even.
Then how did it become part of your process?
Yeah, I can't even say that was my idea. So when I was at Viacom, we worked within the sales division. So of course, sales folks are always looking for what's the differentiator when I'm going to my client and pitching something. It was actually Jason Witt and Nada Strat, who basically, Jason's now the chief operating officer at I forgot the name of the company, whatever. Then Nada's over at Facebook. But like, the both of them came and said, look, these ideas are amazing. The usability lab is amazing. We put this stuff in the real world. People are gonna actually copy it. Like, we should patent this stuff. And at the time, I was like, I don't know what a patent is. Cool, that's whatever. Works for me. So we went about patenting, but the idea was really to do that so that when we brought it to market, guaranteeing effectiveness, but even being able to go to the client and say, you're not gonna get this anyplace else. Now, realistically, patents are very hard to like uphold when it comes to creative. Because like there's 1,000,001 ways I could actually draw a circle, right? So when we went about how we did it, we approached it from a design point of view and how it looks and how it functions, but then from a build point of view, like here are 55 different ways we could actually build it out. And it was interesting, but out of that research and the usability lab came a slew, like the bug unit, the lower third unit, like probably the one patent that I have that everyone's familiar with, the skippable pre-roll, right? Which is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 skip. So the funny story about that, the first version of that was actually called the Porta-Pass. So we built it.
Porta-Pass.
Porta-Pass, yep, with a number 2. And we built it for Pepsi, and the idea was a simple one. Great, we're gonna have a 30-second spot, but at the time when we were doing all these formats, I was like, 30s are fucking boring. Like, no one wants to sit through it. Research showed that when people saw it on a mobile device or on their desktop, you minimize the page, you go to something else, and you hear the sound change, you open it back up. So everyone was missing it, right? So I said, well, what if we actually allow someone to skip it? But at the same time, if I skip it, like I as a consumer want that, brand's gonna be pissed about that. So I said, well, what if you actually created that 30-second spot, we dropped a lower third down in the bottom left corner, and you allow yourself to interact with it for 5 seconds, and then skip the spot. So the Porta-Pass was for Pepsi. We started a 30-second spot. There's a little Pepsi bottle in the lower left-hand corner. It said pour to pass, literally. You scrolled your mouse over it. The bottle turned upside down and starts pouring Pepsi up in the screen. And then that was like a 5-second animation, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When that happened, we gave you a voiceover. This skip was powered by Pepsi. Thank you very much. Boom, and we went right into the content that you wanted. So that was the very first or earlier iteration of how that worked.
Wow, very fascinating. Okay, so JP Morgan Chase, web producer, New York Times, Viacom.
Your research.
And then, I gotta prepare. But, and then, so when, at what point, so you're doing that, like over 15 years, I guess, and then at some point you make a shift to the agency side.
Yeah.
Talk about how that happened and what was the first role.
Yeah, that was interesting. So I spent my time at the kind of publisher side, ag tech side, Google, and another space called Verve. Left Verve, and it was a moment in my career, in my life. I think we all have those moments where like you're really reassessing what it is and if you feel the stuff that you're doing really matters and is making a real impact. So I took a year off, traveled a bunch.
No one's ever questioned that about the advertising industry in general, right? It's very meaningful.
It's crazy. So took a year off, traveled a bunch, and I'll never forget, I was sitting at a pool and I saw a meme. And the meme said, do the things that make you happy, because if you die today, your job will be posted before your obituary, right? And it made me think like, wow, this is really crazy. So I spent a lot of time after seeing that really trying to help other people, specifically people of color and creators of color, and mentoring and creating opportunities. I was posting a bunch about different people who lost their jobs and trying to find jobs and people through LinkedIn. And oddly enough, that guy right there, Brian Gaffin, who was at TBWA at the time, I sent him some talent. I was like, yo, you have this job, you should look at these guys, this guy's really amazing. And he's like, yeah, that's cool, but what about you? And I was like, yo, what about me? He's like, yo, you should come talk to us. And I was like, man, the health stuff, like I don't do this health shit, right? He's like, no, talk. So he introduced me to Jonathan Isaacs and Paul Fleiter, CCO and CSO at the time, went in and talked, and it was just a cool vibe, right? The three of them were cool. And for me, it gave me an opportunity to really get into the agency space, because at a senior executive level, I was an SVP over there, that like you can't get in unless you've had time at the agency before. I had zero of that, but these individuals like, we don't care. We just want you to come in and disrupt, like do what you do, innovate, create all this shit, and we're happy, right? And so got in kind of feeling like, we'll see how this works, and actually enjoyed it, man, because I think the interesting thing about the health side is that, for like 20 years, 19 years, I've been disrupting on all these other different platforms and spaces, and you realize, like, at the end of the day, we're not really saving lives, right? Like, I'm putting asses in fucking car seats, I'm putting feet in sneakers, but like, what does that do? So what was interesting is being able to come to a space where you're actually making an impact on people's lives. Because while we understand things like consumer journeys and like, by understanding where you go and what you do throughout your day and your week or your month, we now identify different touch points in different areas where we reach you across things like Alexa or mobile device or like whatever, social media, so on and so forth, out of home. But like now you layer on top of that like someone's health. Let's talk about like cancer, right? So I understand where you go and what you do and what you buy, but now like how I talk to you when you've just been diagnosed is entirely different from how I talk to you when you're now in chemo, which is entirely different with how I talk to you when you're 7 years out and you've just taken your last prescription of tamoxifen and you're thinking, am I okay, right? Now I'm like, there's no more support. I'm not taking a drug that makes me feel safe. So, it's an interesting place to play in when you can actually say that now I'm actually doing work that's changing lives.
Yeah, wow, that's significant shift, but certainly an important one. Is there, well, actually, let's start with experience design.
Yep.
Kind of how would you describe, you're the chief experience design officer, How would you describe what that role is? And obviously, coming from media, it's going to have probably a slightly different nuance in the health environment.
Yeah, I think it's the role of experience design is essentially individuals who understand the entire landscape of how to communicate effectively to a consumer, right? Because it's not just the digital space, which there's an emphasis on that, but it's how I'm reaching people through every mode possible. You see, the difference in my role and why they created this role within our organization is because typically you don't see XD at the table with a C-suite. So my partner, Oz Reichenberg, is our global chief creative officer, right? So the difference is a lot of times creative officer, they're working with their creative team, they're generating the campaign's idea and so on and so forth. And then at the tail end of that, they're saying, okay, you guys, can you go do some UX for us for this website we have to design, and it makes the website look pretty, and we got some banners we can actually knock out as well. Difference here in our relationship and what we're doing is I am being in at the very forefront of their idea generation. I am sitting next to her and judging and assessing the work the same way a CCO would, and I am actually taking it my path, like understanding what we're looking at and saying, okay, well, if we change this way, it's going to have a lot more legs and opportunity for me to actually blow it out this way across these different platforms. And then I'm taking that work and then working with my teams to ensure that we are not only just doing work that looks beautiful, but quite frankly, everyone in the space of advertising is so focused on fucking doing personas with their data, right? And stopping there. Yeah. I'm saying, I want to take that data and figure out how I deliver to this opportunity to this individual, like in a manner that's relevant. And doing that in a manner that's relevant means I need to do things like dynamic creative optimization, right? Being able to pull in different assets and different copy and calls to action on the fly. And as we move forward, like our role is, within XD is to be able to understand what's coming next, right? So like I'm looking 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the road, and we have to have our ears to the ground so we can help direct and move this stuff, because quite frankly, we're in a space now that's moving so fast that if you don't keep up, you're gonna be left behind. And if we start to look at health, like people already think health was like 10 years behind everyone else. This pandemic now squeezed that up, and now they're making a lot more kind of moves that you'd see other bigger brands make, excuse me. But you know, our role really is just finding smarter ways to disrupt and actually find people and then communicate with them.
Is there any recent work that you would say you're particularly proud of that you'd want to highlight for our audience?
Oh, this is a tough one. I actually just got this question from press yesterday. So there's, I can't speak to some of it, right? But I could say that, you know, our work, I can't mention the brand names. I'll
Okay.
say it like this. We've been doing some
Vertical category.
Yeah. So we've been doing some really incredible. So we've been doing. I'll give you an example. We work with a client, and you know, we talk about experience design. This is a great example of how experience design works. We wanted to reach people who had this particular condition, right? The problem was that condition changes throughout the day and throughout the week, right? We'll say RA, rheumatoid arthritis. So the idea was, look, we need to be with them as a brand throughout the entire process. So when they wake up in the morning, they say, you know, a command word, say, hey, whatever. Then Alexa then could go back and say, well, things like, tell us how you feel 1 out of 10. 7. Okay, great. So you're not feeling that great. Let us make a recommendation. Boom. We're also then saving that back to an app, right? Later on, I'm at the store. I open the store. I trigger an AR experience. I'm looking at different food, and I can now talk one-on-one to someone else that's like a pre-scripted type of experience, and they can actually make suggestions to me on what I should actually be purchasing in there that's good for my healthy eating. I select those things, boom, I notify it, that goes back to my app, now I have that, right? I am now running someplace 2 days later, I take a jog, everything's on my Apple Watch or my Fitbit, that data then goes back. So now when I'm walking into a doctor's office next week and the doctor's saying, how are you doing? And he's looking at that mobile device, he say, well, your mileage looks down between this week and the last week, looks like you changed your eating, you said you felt like this way over the past couple of days with Alexa. So it's tying all these experiences together. But I think that, you know, as we move forward, I'll be able to have more of a conversation on some of the other things we're launching over the next couple months, because we have some really incredible brands like Pfizer, right, who are disrupting and changing the way the world is looking at health now, right? I mean, you look at, you know, brands and like pharma companies are like now seen as like saving the world, right? And Pfizer came out and did that in a really big way this past couple of years. So it's just exciting to be a partner in that type of experience.
Well, and as you said, it's a vertical. It's an industry that's not known for innovation in marketing, right?
Absolutely. Well, here's the thing about that
transforming
too,
it.
right? You start to think about the healthcare space. Look at the biggest companies, Amazon, Apple, like all these people are investing in health. Like every single person in this room is carrying around a device that understands your health, your mobile device, your watches, right? So it's an interesting place to play in.
So for those dialed in and those in the audience, we're going to start taking live questions shortly, so get those ready. And we're taking them online for Walt as well. Mm-hmm. So having said that, you have your point about you know, how do you stay ahead of the competition or being, you know, technologically savvy? What is the state of the creative agency today? Like, how would you rate the industry from an innovation perspective?
That's a good question. You know what? I don't know that. I think agencies have had a harder time with innovating, right? And I think that because, you know, the first thing I notice when we get in here is like every Friday I got to do this fucking timesheet. Like, what the hell is this? Right? And that threw me. Everyone's like, agency, you know the agency people in the room now, right? Because people are like, yeah, that's fine. But like, these times, it kills me. But when you work in an agency, your time is
Some people
money.
may not know what a timesheet is, by the way.
Okay, so for those who don't know, like everything you work on, you have a job code for every piece of business. So what you're doing at the end of that week is you're saying, I worked on this one on Monday for 3 hours, this one's for 6 hours, this one's and so they basically know how much money you are essentially worth.
Billable hours.
Right? Your billable hours.
Yeah.
And it's cool. This is why I can say with 100% certainty, any place I work after this and anyone you are hiring right now, hire fucking agency people because they work harder than anyone I've ever seen because their time is money, right? But I think because of that, because you're always trying to be billable, it's hard to spend the time figuring out what's next, right? So when I'm trying to clock 40 hours from my week, I can't take 5 to 6 hours out of that to go read some stuff or research or go look at this next company and have someone come in and assess my business. Now, the bigger problem as an industry is that everyone is in their own silo, right? So you have your ad tech folks over here doing their thing, you have your publishers over here doing their thing, you have the agencies over here doing their thing. I tell people, I want to hear from you. Like, I want to make time to hear what it is that you're doing and what you're working on, because if you have something that I can build on top of, then great. That means my folks don't have to do anything over on this side. It means that's saving us billable hours and so on and so forth. But what we need to see as an industry is more coming together to create together, because when we're creating together, we're moving the entire industry forward together. And again, it's like, it's too broken.
Yeah, yeah. Nancy Reyes made that same comment earlier in the conversation series about the agency business kind of coming together. Oh, yeah. And actually, by what you've described in your role in experience design, even within the agency, plus broader extended, I think your point extends out to the broader community, but by definition, collaboration has to be stronger for you to succeed, to drive innovation, to adopt new technologies.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Does that seem pretty accurate statement?
Oh, 100%. I mean, my job is to really sit at the intersection of all that. It's like sitting at the intersection of storytelling, design, innovation, and partnering with strategy, of course, your accounts folks, experience, and then of course, creative. Yeah, it's super critical.
So on that note, from a client expectation and brands increasingly expecting measurable outcomes, right? This is nothing new. But I think it probably gets more complicated when you start speaking of the types of experiences that you're creating. How do you manage that process and respond to those asks from the client?
Having smarter people in the room than me. Right?
For sure.
It's having our analytics folks. So we have a team of individuals that, as I'm actually building out things, they kind of bolt on the side of me and say, okay, great, explain how this product works, explains the functionality here, and then it's their job to then think through, okay, this is every single way we're going to actually track them. Look, when you're building anything that's new, and God, like metaverse, right? Thank God we didn't totally broach that, right? But like, you got to start to think about, like, how do we track this up? Because this is what brands want to know. When they're investing their money in something, they need to understand, what's that ROI? What's the return on my investment that I'm actually putting forth? But I think for the most part, a lot of it is standard. You know what I'm saying? But it's important. It has to be, right? Because even as I build stuff, I got to know that this shit that I've just built, is that something I should build again, or how do I build on top of that to make a better experience?
Well, I think and technology as an enabler in general, from an industry perspective, kind of requires more collaboration across many different disciplines that perhaps maybe was more territorial before, right? So speaking of metaverse, we'll take a question from our online chat. With the emergence of extended reality technologies such as the metaverse, what AR, VR, MR tools or resources are you equipped with at VML Y&R to differentiate yourself from competitors in a market that's still in its infancy?
They clearly work in the space. Yeah. No, so we have an entire innovation. I apologize, wherever the camera is, if this is it, I apologize. I don't know the exact names of some of those tools. We have an entire innovation team that actually sits out in KC, Kansas City, and a whole metaverse team. Where literally every single Monday we're doing these metaverse meetings and getting together. So they would know, they would better be able to answer that question, so I can get back to you on that. But I'd say that, let me just talk on metaverse for a second. I think that we are not there yet. Right? It's another it's like everyone's saying for so long, like, well, this is a year of mobile. This is the year of mobile. We've been saying that for like 10 years.
Remember
right?
Second Life?
Oh my God, yes, yes.
Anyone
right?
remember? Some people remember.
Yes. So there's a lot of talk of metaverse, and I don't even think that people thoroughly understand what the metaverse is.
Right.
Like you say metaverse, and people think, oh, Oculus, right? It's like this thing. No, it's a multitude of platforms, right? And it's like a space, and I have multitude of gateways to get into that. I'll be very clear in saying that I don't think the metaverse, it's not ready yet, right? I think there's a lot of missed opportunities there. For the simple, I go in, I did a panel a couple days ago in the creative shop, Metaspace, and we still have no legs. You know what I mean? We're like torsos and up, and that feels weird. But beyond that, I think the greatest space for disruption is not like the virtual world, right? Where it's cool, it's just not there yet. I think the greatest space is gonna be AR, augmented reality. And we were just having a conversation about this earlier. The thing is, it's gonna be how you wear that experience. And when I walk out into public and being able to see things and identify things, the UI designer today in experience design in 8, 9, 10 years is gonna be a copywriter, right? And I tell this to people all the time, like people who are copywriters right now, you're gonna have it's gonna be like 99.com when people are looking for HTML designers or developers. It's gonna be that, because how you communicate is gonna be entirely around a conversation, right? When I'm wearing this and I walk into a store and then it's like, boop, boop, this is this, and I say, hey, yes, I'd like this. It's like a two-way conversation and less touch and less grabbing.
Interesting. I'm going to switch gears for a second, because I think, and we'll come back to this in terms of like what's down the horizon, but an issue that's important both to the club that I know you're an advocate on in terms of DE&I. You also, for those of you who don't know, early this year gathered 7 Black ECDs to shoot a documentary. I think it was a 3-part series called Black Madison Avenue. So check it out if you haven't seen it. And can you share kind of what prompted to create this piece of content and what it meant to you and the experience overall?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've for the past few years just been, as most people would know, right, or who, if you follow me, trying to just disrupt the space, right, and figure out how can we actually dismantle the space that we know it is today, and create opportunity for others, specifically people of color. And I've done that through a multitude of ways. But what was interesting is, New York Festivals came out to me one day, and David Sable and Scott Rose said, hey, like we're willing to give you our platform. Like, what do you want to do with it? Just take it. It's all yours. And I was like, anything? They're like, whatever you want. I was like, so I gotta have like a whole set? They're like, yeah. I was like 4 or 5 cameramen, like sound studio, like they're like, whatever you want. So I was like, oh my God, yeah. So it literally took me 24 hours to figure it out, because selfishly, I'm in this space, I've been in this space for years. Like, I've only met 2 of the Black ECDs. And there's, to your point, so people are aware, 7 or 10, now 9 Black executive creative directors in a major holding agency in the United States, out of something like 1,600,
wow.
1,700.
Wow.
So it's like 0.06%, right? So when we talk about diversity and why it matters and all this shit, like there's still not, anyone doing that. And then when you talk about C-suite for Black creatives, I think there's now 3 of us, right? So Denny Robinson, and actually 4. So, that was about, okay, selfishly, I want to meet these other individuals. And I think the world needs to hear a little bit more of our stories, because it's different when you hear people on social media and everyone complain like, oh, this is the problems I go through in diversity, and this is microaggressions. But when you have 7 executives who can come in and say, yes, I've dealt with those same problems, I think the idea was we wanted to allow people to be a fly on the wall on a conversation that, quite frankly, not many of any people have heard. So I called up those seven individuals. We got on a call, and it was like, okay, so we're gonna be completely candid. Is everyone okay with that? Because like one of us could lose our job over this shit. And everyone's like, yeah, absolutely, let's do it. And so, yeah, we went, shot it, and produced it, and got it out after like 2 or 3 weeks. And it's been like pretty incredible, the response. We've had dozens of universities pick it up and add it to their curriculum now. Duke University, Howard University, Hampton, St. John's University, Keene University. I could go through a list of folks who are now making it a part of their classrooms for their master's and their undergrads class actions.
Yeah, I mean, and it's been a pillar of the club for so long to try and educate the next generation of people of color and to make it a more diverse industry. We know the numbers overall are not great. So that's great to hear. And when I think about the last few years and a lot of the hard moments that we had across many ethnicities, many different types of diversity, the best part has been the allyship and advocacy that's come out of it, and the opportunity to create pieces of content like Black Madison. So that's great to hear. And an online question says, how has your experience advocating for DE&I influenced your role as Chief Experience Design Officer?
That's a good question. I mean, this for me has always been like a dream type of job, right? So I always thought like, oh man, one day I want to be a Chief Experience Design Officer or a CCO, and then I'm done, right? And I think that we get to these points in our career where, even like we all have that one family member, right? You go home and then you're like, oh, grandma's gonna say some real crazy shit, but like grandma's just being grandma, but grandma's being grandma because she's like 80, 90 years old and she's lived life and it's like, I don't really give a damn what I say, you could take it or leave it, right? Yeah. I think we get to a point in our careers where we have these moments, and I think the past couple years I've gotten to that space, feeling like, I've accomplished the things I want to accomplish.
Sure.
And success for many of us in advertising is defined by your salary, your title, your car, how big your house is, right? And that's unfortunate, right? But we can be so easily misguided because we're thinking about the new business and the fucking awards and all this stuff. Success to me is defined by how many people I can help, right? Because like you got to realize, we are a dot on a fucking line, a timeline that's so long, right? So you and I and us, like, we are a speck on, like, throughout the world and through history and in time that doesn't really matter. So when I'm gone tomorrow, the money I made in my fucking title means nothing.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, I try to inspire other individuals to do more, to be more, and do more than beyond what I've done, because I know that if I can help other people that look like me, that's creating opportunity for my 7-year-old daughter, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I want to make an impact on people and create opportunities that, you know, lessens the amount of hurdles they need to get over, so they don't have to kind of come the same way I have.
Yeah, it's a great point, because it's not just about diversity and representation, it's about inclusion, right? And having the next generations have opportunities to follow in footsteps of pioneers like yourself. That's great. We're going to take some live questions. Someone has I don't know if Michael, who has a mic that's going on, or is it Cameron? Okay, cool. Do we have any live questions? Take up 30 seconds to think about that. I'll ask another question. So putting that all into context, what are you most excited about, you know, in the coming year when it comes to your role as Chief Experience Designer?
Yeah, I think I'm most excited around really just kind of taking what I do and then just blowing it out across the rest of the globe. So we're spending time now as a leadership team really going out, assessing other different areas, and you know, we don't want to disrupt the way what people are doing and how they're doing it, but we want to influence and inspire folks to really kind of up the level and kind of take what we do and blow it out everywhere. So I'm really just excited to just get out there and start meeting other folks and really growing the business beyond North America, because there's just so much opportunity. We've now, as an agency, really for the first time, really brought all those health agencies together. So it's an opportunity to really grow on a global scale and level like we haven't seen before.
Cool, cool. Questions from the audience? Anyone? First hand is, oh, there's one over here.
Hello. Hi, my name is Cliff Washington. I'm an art director with 360 Agency. And my question for Walter is, you talked about in agency life how, you know, you move so fast that it's hard to find time to reflect on, you know, how to be more efficient and make processes better, maybe make communication better. So within your career or in your role right now, how are you able to kind of slow things down when you know things are getting out of hand and you need to reassess processes, communication, things like that, when agency is kind of designed to just plow through 1,000 miles per hour?
Yeah, whew, Cliff. You trying to get me in trouble up here. No, I mean, that's a damn good question, man. You know, here's the thing. You know, in what we do now, all of us, right, in working from home, it's really fucking difficult, right? Like, it's like you work in the same place you sleep, in the same place you take care of your kids, and it's like, it's hard to separate your work from your life, right? And we all know, I think we're all working way beyond, you know, the hours that we've worked before, but when you get into those moments, I think the tricky part is identifying those moments. And the tricky part is knowing when to actually pump the brakes and when to stop, but also the bigger thing is having the voice and the confidence to tell the people around you, we need to pause, right? And I think it's easier for an executive or for a leader to do that, not so much for someone who's junior. But again, and I say this all the time, we're in a moment now where speaking up is quite frankly like asked of people, right? And especially, again, going back to the point of working from home, like our job now is to inspire individuals and make them feel welcome and make them feel as though they're in spaces they can thrive and grow, but more importantly, feel as though they have a say in the business and what it is that they are doing. So, you know, to your point, I think it's understanding when and knowing when to stop and then be vocal about that. You know, it's hard because, you know, even in my role, I feel like I'm burning the candle at both ends a lot of the time, right? And I think we all do. An agency world will like chew you up and spit you out really, really quickly, but I think it also boils down to the people and the teams that you work with, right? So it's a trickle-down effect, man. If you're working in a place that doesn't, that takes you for granted, or a place that, you know, doesn't give you the time to kind of pause and do things the right way and establish a formal process, and they're just gonna burn you out, man. That might not be the place for you. So I tell people, you know, now's the time where a lot of people are hiring. And if you're not in a place where you totally feel comfortable or a place where you can actually succeed, it's actually okay to look elsewhere. Nothing wrong with that. I hope I answered your question, man. Do you need a job? I got you, man.
Unless anyone's that dialed in or here that works for me, then you can't do that. Having said that, do you have, you know, you've had a remarkable career and fascinated by the kind of like the evolution.
Thank you.
What would you say to aspiring creatives? Do you have like a kind of a mantra or some kind of philosophy that, you know, that?
You know, I say, you know, for an up-and-coming creative, I think it's being inquisitive, right? Because in the space that we're working in, like, you have to be one of these people who's just like curious about different things. That's what makes a great creative. But I also tell folks that, you know, understand the entire digital landscape. Like, you should go out and, I mean, if you can afford it, you should have an Oculus. You should be playing in these spaces and seeing how they work. You should be tampering with different toys and different things. But also, one of the most important things for a creative is knowing how to tell a story, right? And knowing how to present. And this really goes across as, like a spectrum of you know, types of roles. The more senior you get, the more your job becomes inspiring people around you, inspiring your clients, inspiring the consumer to buy a thing, right? And so it's the people that get to these levels are the ones that are really good storytellers, the ones that know how to present really well. And I often tell folks when they ask, okay, well, how do I work on my presenting and how my storytelling? I said, do you have any nieces or nephews? Do you have a kid? Right, the first thing we do when we read a book is we're overly animated, right? You know when to pronounce those words like that, or you know when to come really quiet, right? And it's the same thing when you pitch. You get out there and you present. You should pitch to your clients or pitch to your teams the same way you tell your story to your children, right? Because at the end of the day, we have to realize advertising as a whole is about really inspiring people, right? And eliciting an emotion from someone. Right? I'm advertising when I'm sitting here having a conversation with you, right? We are all pitching in some way, shape, or form. So it's those individuals who know how to actually carry their voice appropriately and tell those stories and present them in a way that gets people excited, makes people sad, gets people angry. Those are the ones that will excel.
I love that. Advertising is eliciting emotion. That's another saying for us, Gina, that we have to capture. On behalf of the Ad Club, I want to thank you all for coming. Thank you all for dialing in. And also want to please give a round of applause for Walt for being here. Thank you, Walt.
Thank you. Thank you. Good stuff, man. Thanks, bud.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
Thank you. Appreciate it.